Welcome to Even Tacos Fall Apart, where we have conversations with experts and share personal stories to help navigate the complexities of mental health with compassion and empathy. I'm MommaFoxFire, and today we are diving deep into an essential topic that touches the core of our well-being, self-resonance and nonviolent communication. How often have you found yourself struggling to understand your own inner thoughts and feelings? Do you sometimes wish you could communicate with yourself and others more compassionately? Well, my friends, today's episode is here to help you unlock the power of self-compassion and healthier communication. Our guest for today is the incredible Sarah Peyton, an expert in relational neuroscience. We delve into the profound connection between our brains and our emotions, uncovering the secrets to self-resonance and the art of nonviolent communication. I guarantee you will walk away from this conversation with a deeper understanding of yourself and a new perspective on how we can shape a world of better communication and self-compassion. Before we dive in, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so you never miss an episode. And if you find this episode valuable, please consider leaving a like or even a review. Any engagement can help us reach more listeners and really provides me with the encouragement to keep this going. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and join me for an episode filled with insights, wisdom, and practical tips. Remember, even tacos fall apart, but they are still delicious and we still love them. Just like life, it's all about perspective. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday. I appreciate you so much being here and just for showing up and doing your thing, being part of the community. I am testing out some new stuff tonight, so you'll see that the chat looks a little bit different, and there's a reason for that. We are going to jump right in because our guest tonight is the wonderful Sarah Peyton, and I am so excited to talk about self-resonance and nonviolent communication. I think it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful conversation. So a little bit about Sarah, and then we're going to jump in. Sarah Peyton is a certified trainer of nonviolent communication, neuroscience educator. She integrates brain science and the use of resonant language to heal personal and collective trauma with exquisite gentleness. I love that term. Sarah is a sought-after expert who brings neuroscience expertise together with depth work, self-compassion, and the transformative potential of language. She works with audiences internationally to create a compassionate understanding of the effects of relational trauma on the brain and teaches people how words change and heal us. She teaches and lectures internationally and is the author of 3 books: Your Resonant Self, Guided Meditations and Exercises to Engage Your Brain's Capacity for Healing; the companion, Your Resonant Self Workbook, From Self-Sabotage to Self-Care, and Affirmations for Turbulent Times, Resonant Words to Soothe the Body and Mind. So Sarah, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Oh, what a pleasure to be here with you, MommaFoxFire.
And we are, if you are interested in connecting with Sarah on any platforms, I just posted all the links to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all of that. If you want to connect with her, feel free to do so. And Sarah, we're just going to jump right in. So can you tell us a little more about your experiences? What made you become interested in specializing in neuroscience?
Well, I love knowing why things happen that happen. And it never occurred to me that I could find out about the inside of my own brain. When I started this journey, the inside of my own brain was a really difficult place to live. There was a lot of criticism flying around and tons of shame. And I grew up, I was born in 1962. When I was growing up, I was like really into psychology. I was like 10 years old and trying to find psychology textbooks. and that would have been 1972, right? And the textbooks were all like, whatever happens in the first 3 years of life, you're screwed. I was like, oh no, this is not good news for me. So I just, I was just like knuckling down, starting when I was 10, just trying to live through it. I discovered when I was 12 years old, I discovered that if I smoked weed, then I would be able to live with my mother, because my mother was very intense and very critical. We know our critical voices come from somewhere. I know where mine came from. She had one inside of her, and she shared it liberally. And I discovered that if I numbed myself out, I could survive. It was such a relief. And then I figured, well, the only option I have, besides having this really difficult place to live inside my head, is to numb it out. So that's what I kind of focused on and worked with for the next couple of years. And it was quite a long time in. I stopped using marijuana and when I got out of my mother's house, it became a lot easier to live with the inside of my own head. And then when I was about, I must have been like 40 years old or 45 years old, I stumbled across nonviolent communication. And I just was still, this is 45 years in, I'm still thinking, okay, the inside of my brain is not going to change. And then I got into a nonviolent communication workshop, and they were like, tell us something that's hard for you. And my husband, sweetest man in the world, and I had just adopted a kid who had been living on the street. We discovered that this kid was living on the street. We were living in a one-bedroom house with an unfinished basement. My husband went downstairs in this house, and he built a bedroom for this boy, so he would have a place to live if he wanted one. Aww. It was unbelievable. And the boy was like, I can't take charity. I can't live with you. And we're like, okay. Then we figured out, my husband was, he's a salesman, and he's traveled internationally. So he was going on a long business trip to Russia for 3 weeks. And so I said, hey, sweetheart, to this boy who became our son, I said, my husband's leaving for 3 weeks. It's a little scary for me to be alone. I know you can't take charity. Would you be willing to stay with me while he's gone, and just so I feel safer in the house? And he said, sure.
I love that.
And he came over, and he put his stuff in the room, and he came upstairs, and he said, Sarah, can I really leave my stuff in this room? Aww. And I was like, yes, sweetheart, yes, you can. And so, when we end up living on the street, we know there's a ton of trauma. So there's part one of what's going on. But part two is that I had a ton of trauma coming out of my mom's home. She had dissociative identity disorder from having lived through a very difficult early childhood where her father tried to kill her mother in front of her and that sort of thing. Gosh. So, she actually did an amazing job giving me a home that was violence-free and addiction-free. But, she carried the pain with her, and there was a lot going on. So here we are, my son, my new son and me. I can't hug him. He's 15 years old. He's a kid who needs hugs. I try to go to hug him, and my arms just stop. It was the weirdest thing. I was like, okay, I guess I have to work with this too. I just tried to be verbally really affectionate. But I got into this nonviolent communication workshop, and they're like, choose something you're having trouble with. And I thought, well, I'm definitely having trouble with this. So I started to talk about it. And now the kind of reaction we'd been getting to bringing our son into our house was people were like, he's going to murder you in your beds. Oh. What are you doing? This is a very bad idea. There was not a lot of support. And then you have to be really firm. You have to be really rigid. You have to set up rules and boundaries. Make sure he doesn't take advantage of you. Lots of this stuff. Lots of advice. Lots of really unwelcome and unfriendly advice, too. But anyway, so I was used to getting advice. So I was, how you get like, you're braced, for what people are going to say. So I said, here's this deal. I can't hug my son. And people, instead of giving me advice, started to wonder what kinds of emotions I had. Are you scared? Are you really wanting to protect him, And do you feel really shy? Do you need to know that you matter? And are you really sad? They would just guess all kinds of stuff. And I felt the strangest thing. It was something I had never felt before. I felt like I was a little boat in a huge sea, in a stormy sea, and each time they would guess a feeling and a need, I would come up at the top of the crest of the ocean, and I would look around, and I would be like, oh, I'm going this way. This is my next feeling. And I would go down into the feeling, and they would name, the feeling and the need, and I would come up. And this, maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes of this. And all of a sudden, I had a sort of flashback.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a flashback of being a 3-year-old kid and reaching to hug my mom and feeling my mom's traumatized body tighten. She couldn't relax when I hugged her.
Yeah.
She was anticipating bad things. And I loved her so much. And so I was like, oh my God, this is why I can't hug my son. Because a long time ago, I made an agreement with myself that I wouldn't hug anybody in order not to have to worry that I'm hurting them and not to have to, experience the shame of somebody not wanting to hug me.
Mm-hmm.
And I went home and I could hug my son. There was just no problem. And I was like,
that's amazing.
So then here comes the neuroscience. I was like, what the heck just happened? How did that happen? And so it was right at the beginning of the time when people were where they were publishing the first research stuff on what happens in MRIs when you're looking at brains and you're trying to figure out what they do in relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered the work of Matthew Lieberman, who is at UCLA. And he had just published a piece of research that showed that when you name emotions and you name them correctly, the body calms. The amygdala calms, and the body calms, and your heart rate goes down. And I was like, this is what just happened to me.
Yeah.
Instead of giving me weird, scary, unwelcome advice, people were wondering what I was feeling. I was like, wow. And that was the beginning of both things, really, of nonviolent communication and relational neuroscience, and the study into relational neuroscience. How do we change each other's brains for the better? Yeah. That's what I became really interested in.
That's really neat. So I have a 9-year-old, and he's curious about everything. I mean, and of course, being a kid now, if you're curious about something, you just look up a YouTube video about it and you've got information. I can't imagine. So he lives with Tourette syndrome, and he has a neurologist. And when we went to see his neurologist the first time, and this is why we stuck with this neurologist. We went to see his neurologist for the first time, and his neurologist was like, I have this still. I have Tourette syndrome as well, and it's why I became a brain surgeon. It's why I became a neurologist, and I still have it to this day. I still have tics and everything. So what you have does not limit you at all. You just have to figure out how to work around it. And so every time he's curious about anything and he looks it up and everything, I can't imagine him trying to absorb the information that, hey, your brain is set into place from already, 6 years ago. Yeah. Like, I can't imagine him trying to absorb that at his age. That seems so heavy.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
Well, that is an incredible story.
Oh, it was an incredible thing to live through it, and our boy was wonderful. He was really impacted by the trauma and ended up dying of alcoholism. Oh, but we got to love the hell out of him on that journey.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Generally, what is self-resonance? So you've already kind of talked around it, but what is self-resonance?
Self-resonance is learning to be that group that was asking Sarah questions for ourselves. It's like learning to turn toward ourselves and say, Sarah, I wonder if you're feeling a little anxious in this moment, or are you feeling sad in this moment, or I wonder if you are a little bit angry. And then when the inner self says, yeah, I think I'm a little sad in this moment. And we go, wow, I wonder if you're really sad because you so love people and you want them to not have to die of trauma, And then the inside Sarah goes, yeah, that's exactly right. And it's a kind of like, we don't think just like when we have a conversation with a kid, we don't think we know everything about the kid. We're like wondering, what's going on with this kid? Will they talk to me? Will they share a little bit of their inner world? we have that same kind of sweet relationship with our inner self of warm curiosity and the ability to kind of, it's a little bit like these two things, the warm curiosity and the being able to say yes to feelings, happen in two different parts of the brain. Mm-hmm. So we kind of get to differentiate these different parts of the brain by turning toward ourselves with self-resonance and self-warmth and warm curiosity.
I love that term, warm curiosity. That is such a, it conjures just such an image and such a feeling in my brain, that warm curiosity. Because you can definitely have cold curiosity, for sure.
You can. I wonder if that's anger that you're feeling over there, Sarah.
Right. Feeling a little mad.
Oh, yes, it is, actually.
Yeah. How can someone recognize that they are not experiencing self-resonance, and how do you cultivate self-resonance in yourself?
Well, you can recognize that you're not experiencing it when you're really beating yourself up. And it sort of becomes fun to begin to have this conversation with the voice that wants to beat you up. So, Sarah, you're an idiot. I don't know why you did that again. Now, that's actually emotional and verbal abuse that lodges in the brain. It's good to know that when we're calling ourselves names, we're doing our brains some harm. But we get to actually start to talk to this voice. We get to go, oh, Sarah's voice. I wonder if you're really impatient and exhausted from trying to get Sarah to do what you want her to do. Are you confused and angry because you don't have the effect that you want to have on her? Would you love her to live in a world where she never made another mistake again? And, you can start to have these conversations with that voice, and the voice goes, yeah, I'd really like there to be never a mistake again. I'm really tired. And then the voice says, and the shame when I make a mistake is just too much for me. I want to stop that shame. So there's like a kind of the conversation develops in the same way that it develops with a child when we turn toward ourselves and we begin to ask these questions. So there's an example of not doing it, and then there's an example of what starts to happen when we do it, and it becomes strangely quiet inside of our brains.
All right.
When we begin to say, oh, sweetheart, is that what's going on for you? And the brain goes, yes.
I like that. Just very like, yeah.
Yeah.
I love the idea of having this conversation with yourself, right? Because I definitely have a lot of negative self-talk. It is something that I have been working on with my therapist for years.
Yeah.
And of course, it's gotten better and everything. There's been progress and all of that good stuff. But there's always work to be done. I feel like, at least for me. I'm the kind of person
for me too.
There will always be work to be done.
For me too.
But having that conversation about the way that you phrased, the voice inside you is having this feeling, and you have to confirm that feeling and kind of sit with it for a minute, I think is different from anything that I've talked to my therapist about, because my therapist is always saying, well, when you have this negative self-talk, it's all about reframing and everything. But I think acknowledging the feeling that goes along with that part of your brain, and the fact that feeling that goes along with that part of your brain is not the only feeling that the rest of you is feeling.
Exactly. I love that. Yeah. That's a beautiful way to point it out. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. How does a facilitator maintain a safe environment for healing work that comes along with self-resonance, especially for someone who's exploring or struggling with more serious or sensitive or explosive situations like trauma or infidelity or abuse or those kinds of things?
Yeah. Now, this is a great question because there's a couple different ways to go about healing. And one of them is, like you're talking about, getting a good therapist, getting somebody that, one of my favorite things to use as a indicator of whether or not a therapist is going to be good for us is if we have a sense that they genuinely like us.
Yeah.
And so when you have somebody who genuinely likes you, then you can start to experiment with letting that person in. That's one way to work. Another way to work is if you don't trust being liked, then you have to actually find a therapist that's a little bit standoffish so that you can bear to be with them. Because if you can't stand being liked, then somebody who likes you is just going to creep you out.
Mm-hmm.
So you just kind of pay attention to those things and notice them and have affection for yourself, whatever you find. Sometimes people have had so much trauma that they don't even have the sense that they could trust another person even enough to have a therapist who's kind of neutral.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, no, I can't do any work with anybody else. And that was actually why I wrote the first book, Your Resonant Self, so that people would have a book that they could turn to, because a book is less scary than people if we've lived through scary experiences with people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another way. And then, like, sometimes people like YouTube videos. Like you said, you can get on the YouTube and look at the videos and start to, And, but what happened for me, I wrote this wonderful book about the relational neuroscience of self-compassion and how to do it. And I started traveling around the world. It was before COVID. I was traveling around the world. And people would say to me, your book is wonderful, but I can't do it. I can't be kind to myself. I can't be warm with myself. And it seems to violate my sense of integrity. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. If it violates our sense of integrity to be warm with ourselves, that's really giving us a lot of information.
It is.
So I started to look at the idea that we make agreements with ourselves to try to save ourselves, make ourselves safe, and also to meet our need for integrity, and also to love people that are close to us. So if we have a contract not to be kind to ourselves, it could be something that has to do with integrity. It could be something like, I, Sarah, solemnly swear to my own essential self that I will not be kind to myself in order to balance a world where so many people can receive no kindness.
Oh.
And that, no matter the cost to myself, that's an integrity vow that some people make. Or sometimes there's so much care for the mother. I will not be kind to myself in order not to leave my mother alone, because she could not be kind to herself. This is another contract that people make. Or sometimes they want to make their parents right. I will not be kind to myself in order to make my father right, because he always thought I was wrong and that I didn't deserve kindness. So there's so many ways that we can make these kind of strange and unexpected unconscious contracts with ourselves. And we just think they're true. We just think I'm not good enough, or I'm a bad person, or I don't deserve kindness. We just think I don't deserve kindness because I don't deserve kindness. It's perfectly obvious. What do you mean? What do you mean challenging me on that? Of course I don't deserve kindness. And then you go, okay, so you don't deserve kindness. You'll believe that you don't deserve kindness in order to, and then they'll say something like, oh, well, to explain why I never received it when I was small. I must not have deserved it. And we go, oh, okay, is that a good belief? And the person goes, oh, not such a good belief, I guess. I'll release myself from that contract. And people really do tend to change and shift and make changes, especially in these ways that we believe negative things about ourselves. And especially once we start to realize, oh, heck, I'm doing this to myself out of my own integrity. Might not be the very best idea, might not be the best thing for my health or well-being.
Yeah. I am amazed. Like, I never would have put those together as kind of contracts, but you're absolutely right. It's just you make up these justifications in your head and you're forcing yourself into that belief.
Yeah. Like somebody I was teaching today, and I said, and the contracts usually or often help us make sense of our lives. And the person said, I don't understand what you're saying. Can you put this together for me a little better? And I said, okay, what do you believe about yourself that's negative? And the person said, I believe that I will always be alone. And I said, oh, okay. So if it's a contract that you've made with yourself that's making sense of the world, then it would be, I promise myself that I will believe that I will always be alone in order to explain why I was always alone as a child. And the person was like, oh, now I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
That does make sense, that I would try to make sense of my world by believing these negative things. Yeah.
Man. Are there any specific exercises that you would love to see more folks do that would support self-resonance and healing?
Well, there are a couple of different ways to go about this too. There are guided meditations that are offered for free on my website. On my homepage at sarahpeyton.com, you can hit the Start Healing Now button and sign up for my email welcome series. And it'll give you a free chapter from my first book and be led through a bunch of free meditations, videos, and practice exercises which explain the foundational concepts of resonance and how to use it to change your brain and heal your brain. But another possibility is that the workbook, which, you know, I went around the world with that first book and I was like, okay, we got to start talking about these contracts. Second book is all about the contracts, the Your Resonant Self workbook. So that one, if you like workbooks and writing stuff down, you can work with the book. So it just depends. I like having a lot of different opportunities and options for different people's learning styles because brains really have different ways of integrating information.
Yeah.
Some people need the relationship and some people need the distance and the stuff on paper.
I am so grateful that you have it in multiple different ways because, you know, I am someone who struggles with meditation. My form of meditation is doodling and drawing. And so for me to try to do a specific kind of guided meditation, they just never really work out for me. There is one podcast that does like 10-minute meditations, and those are almost too long.
I can imagine.
But
many of mine are 3 to 5 minutes long because I have that too, you know, with my brain. Yeah, I like things to happen fairly quickly.
Absolutely. But something like a workbook is right up my alley.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's funny because people really do learn in different ways. My kids are both in music lessons. One of them's taking guitar, one of them's taking a violin. And whenever they were first starting out, both of their music teachers individually, they're in two separate instructors, two separate rooms. Both of them individually came to me and said, you know, your 9-year-old really wasn't understanding until I started talking about it in terms of music math. And then he got it. And then the next instructor said, you know, your 16-year-old wasn't really getting it until I started talking about it in terms of music math. And it's so funny because it's just like all they had to do was change just the terms that they were using a little bit. And then all of a sudden, going from something creative and kind of nebulous, it was like, nope, this is really just math. And now for both of them, it makes absolute sense.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But I could, absolutely tell that both of these instructors had experience with so many kids who learned in so many different ways that they find the one that works for that individual child. And fortunately, both of my kids like math. So,
oh, that's great.
So I want to switch to talking about nonviolent communication a little bit. Can you give us an overview of what nonviolent communication means?
Yes, nonviolent communication was a type of a way to use language that's very specific and very intentional and was developed by a fellow named Marshall Rosenberg, who spent some decades wandering around the world talking to people about how they use language. And what he discovered over time, it's almost like he was doing the relational neuroscience research before there were MRIs. He was just really listening and trying to figure out what really worked for people to bring them together. And what he realized was that everybody's got feelings, and everybody has context for those feelings that are really important and that are shared universally. So if I'm mad at my husband because he didn't balance the checkbook and he wrote a check that that overdrew us. Then I have needs for predictability and for sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And I have needs for having resources remain available. And my husband wrote this check and didn't check because he has needs for sustainability that he's, like a little bit of wishful thinking perhaps, but he wants there to be enough money there.
Mm-hmm.
And he has needs for predictability. He wants to be able to fulfill his financial commitments. And also, he has a need for just, really being able to lean into resources.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we're mad at each other, once we start to look at what the needs are often the same needs.
Mm-hmm.
So we're maybe going about getting those needs met in ways that are not particularly helpful for couple stability and for a peaceful, easy life.
Mm-hmm.
But once we start to tap into what are the needs and longings of each other, then we're moved to feel our commonality and to feel the connectedness of our hearts in a different way than the basic fight, lets us do. So with nonviolent communication, we're thinking about what are our feelings and what are our needs and longings. And then we're also getting pretty clear about what started the whole deal. Like, where did it start? And we're getting pretty clear about what we want to know from each other, whether we want to know about each other's needs or each other's feelings, or if we want to, once we know each other's needs and feelings, if we want to sit down and make a different plan with the money and see if that works better. Like sometimes people decide that only one person will write the checks, or sometimes people decide that I've been doing the balancing the checkbook for the whole time. It's your turn to take on balancing the checkbook so that you can track the way the flow of money goes. And so we'll make different agreements and try them out, see if they work. And if they don't work, we go back to the drawing board and try again to figure out how to move forward. And it's really helpful with those. Like I said, if somebody has a wishful thinking way of looking at the world, that's actually a contract. So if we also know about the unconscious contract work, it can be really helpful to be able to work through some of the things where we're meeting needs by not actually being in relationship with reality.
Yeah. So the nonviolent communication part is the understanding what the needs are behind the fight necessarily, but then is it the actual language that you use as well?
Yeah. I have a friend who says that nonviolent communication is a spiritual practice masquerading as a communication system.
I like that.
So, as you get used to thinking about what people's needs might be, then you start to think about the whole world differently. There's just a lot less irritation and annoyance that's flowing because you don't have the idea that people, before you start playing with nonviolent communication, you can kind of have the idea that people are out to get you and that they're just doing things to make you crazy.
Yeah.
I could think, oh, my husband just, he's writing those checks. He just wants to get back at me for me having decided that we would go to Los Angeles for Thanksgiving when he wanted to go to Kentucky. We'll make these, we'll have these ideas about, kind of like ideas about judgment and ideas about revenge and ideas about people doing things on purpose. And as we start to tune into the needs, then we kind of let go of those judgments and those ideas and those stories. That can actually be awfully painful. Yeah.
And it's just better understanding of the situation as a whole. I mean, the more informed you are, the better you can communicate, right?
Yeah, yeah. And the more relaxed you feel, the better you communicate. If I'm going into a story that my husband is trying to get revenge on me, then it's like there's a lot of tension in my body.
Yeah.
And if I go, oh man, he's got a difficult relationship with reality, there can be some tension, but there can be some relaxation too. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we typically communicate differently when our own needs are met versus when they're unmet?
We typically do communicate much more easily when our needs are met. Yeah, or when they're at least acknowledged. Then that just calms the whole nervous system. And then we can see each other instead of seeing the stories we have about each other. When our needs are not met, then we're much more likely to have stories about each other.
Yeah. That's something that I feel like if you're already communicating from the same page, you're going to probably stay on the same page, right?
Yeah. And maybe the same page is generosity with each other or openness, or again, kind of coming back to the idea of warm curiosity.
I like that.
Yeah.
How do you apply nonviolent communication to everyday situation? What does it look like for nonviolent communication to replace stances of being defensive or withdrawn or afraid or on the attack? What does that look like?
Are you kind of thinking about if somebody's on the defensive and the other person uses nonviolent communication with them, or are you thinking more about using it with ourselves?
I mean, either way.
Yeah, either way. Yeah. So if we we'll begin to notice when we're having judgments or when we're being defensive. And if we have that curiosity about ourselves, we're like, I can hear the charge in my own voice. I can hear it with myself, or I can hear it with my family. There's something up. For a while, when I was first studying nonviolent communication, I had this wonderful set of refrigerator magnets. There were like 50 refrigerator magnets with different needs on them.
Oh, that's
cool. I would sit down on my kitchen floor and I would pull the refrigerator magnets down where I could see them. And I would pick out, I had feelings ones and needs ones. I would pick out all the feelings that I had. There would be like 27 feelings. I would be like, where did I get 27 feelings about this? And then I would pick out a need for each feeling. So if I was frustrated, there might be a need for efficiency. If I was angry, there might be a need for justice. If I was grieving, there might be a need for mourning. And I would pull these together, and as I would do this, I would feel my body calm. And I would go, wow. I thought, this is it's like in these moments when I'm losing it, when I have a lot of judgments, in these moments I have so many feelings and I have so many needs. It's like a traffic jam. And getting the experience of starting to untangle and get those cars moving again out of the traffic jam is, it's very brain changing. And it's very heart changing because we start to see how complex we are and how much we love things and how much we love things to feel right and to feel good. And as we get to know each other more and more ease, we'll begin to recognize the big swaths of feeling more easily. So now, when I get upset, it's no longer I don't have to pull out the 27 different feelings. I'll go, okay, what's the big one? The big one is, the big one is unfelt grief. That's my favorite. Is unfelt grief. And when I'm in judgment, it's almost always unfelt grief.
Yeah. That's I wish everyone had those magnets and could do those exercises,
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool to have even something like on an app or a website to just say like, okay, let's pick the feelings. Now let's line those up with the needs. I think that's a really cool thing to try to do, to try to help you understand yourself a little bit better.
I was just reading a graphic novel about Indigenous people in Canada. And in the graphic novel, the boy got into therapy and they had feelings cards. And he started talking about his feelings. And I was like, this is so wonderful. It's entering our world. We're starting to see it. Yeah. It's even showing up in graphic novels.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How does the language we use impact our growth and learning and connection to ourselves?
Oh, the language we use either supports more neural growth for self-connection or reinforces those old patterns from childhood that our families used that weren't so healthy. So, it makes a real difference if I'm saying to myself, Sarah, you're an idiot, as opposed to, Sarah, do you feel so frustrated and tired? Do you need some acknowledgement of your exhaustion? Do you long for a kind of care where somebody else would come in and just you would just point and they would know what you meant and they would just do it. Would that be so wonderful? It's an impossible dream guess. I'd be like, yes, I just want to be able to not even use words, and not even to have a straight finger. I'm so tired my finger won't even straighten. To point with a curved finger and have everything happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, especially when at the beginning you were talking about we used to feel like brains were kind of solid by age 3.
Yeah.
And now, there are more and more things showing that you are constantly developing, redeveloping. You can repair, you can damage those different pathways and everything in your brain. So it's really cool that something as simple as language can have an impact on your brain.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is.
I often think that words, so inside the brain, the neurons communicate with each other with chemicals. Mm-hmm. They send chemicals to each other. And they could send anger chemicals to each other. And they could send comfort chemicals to each other. And that's what we can do. It's almost like our words are the chemicals that travel outside of brains, between brains, to carry the messages that we want to carry. So we can ask ourselves, what kind of message do I want to carry?
I like that. I'm gonna purposefully send my brain comfort chemicals for the next week. I'm gonna work on it.
That's wonderful.
It's gonna be really helpful that I'm gonna be on vacation. So.
Oh yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
Fingers crossed that Hurricane Brett or Tropical Storm Brett stops dead in its tracks before it gets to where we're going. But
oh my goodness, I'll cross my fingers with you.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. What benefits do folks who consciously work on self-healing and practice this nonviolent communication, what benefits do they have that go beyond just themselves?
Well, when we start to use this kind of language with our own selves and our own brains, we start to realize the power that we have to support the neural growth of other brains. And we start to realize the great deal of influence that we have to change how we respond to the world. I just had the incredible experience last week of traveling to a company that's been using the Your Resonant Self book as a basis for business communication.
Oh, that's cool.
I was doing interviews with 24 out of 100 employees that use resonance with each other and use a knowledge of relational neuroscience with each other. And they really notice when they start to have a charge. They really notice when they start to want to judge each other or judge themselves, or they're making bad decisions. And they go in with feelings and needs. I had one woman come to the interview. I loved it so much. She came to the interview and she was carrying a laminated feelings and needs sheet. And she sat down with me. And I thought she'd brought it as like a to show me, what they used. But she said, I brought my feelings and needs sheet because I felt nervous about coming to the interview. And it makes me feel reassured to know that I have very good reasons for my feelings.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's something that carries through in all their communications. They're a healthcare company, and they use it to communicate with each other, to communicate with their clients, to communicate with insurance companies. I was just stunned. I was like, this is so magical. So this is exactly and the answer to what you're asking. How do things change when we start to learn this for ourselves? And then what happens when we bring it to the outer world?
It would be hard for me to use nice language with an insurance company, I think, if I was at a healthcare company. So I hope that it helps everyone at that company have a better day.
Yeah, no kidding.
Than they might otherwise.
Yeah. Everybody in every way. Yeah.
But it's so nifty that, that employee thought, I am recognized, I am feeling anxious, I am feeling nervous. The reason that I'm feeling nervous is this, and what I'm going to do about it is this. And then, was able to just do something about it. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I make sense. And I am worthy of taking action to support myself.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. Well, we are at, I'm sorry. I do have one more question for you. So Bite Mark sent this question ahead of time. She would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I have a number of favorite poems. And the one that's coming to mind right now that I can remember a few words of is the Mary Oliver poem that's got as part of the poem the soft animal of our body. It's a poem about letting the soft animal of our body communicate what's true to us. I love that poem. Yeah. I'm sorry that I don't have it fully memorized.
No, that is okay. It looks like it is called Wild Geese. Does that sound right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Can you read it to us?
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh,
so
wonderful.
This is Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. That is beautiful.
I'm so glad you read it. I would have cried all the way through. I cried all the way through as you were reading.
I do my best not to cry on. I cry all the time though. Like I do have a box of tissues just right here in case I need it, because you can ask my kids. I cried earlier about a cow and a duck who were best friends, and the cow wouldn't get out of the pond.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So there's no shame in my crying game.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Well, we are towards the end of our conversation here. I am missing here it is. I knew I put it over there so I would know right where it was. I have a magic wand here. It is time for our magic moment. If you could wave this magic wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception or theory surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
It would be the idea that our brains are telling us the truth when they're mean to us. Our brain, I always love the phrase, it's not truth, it's trauma. When our brains are telling us bad things, it's not because it's true. It's because our brains are at their wits' end and don't know how else to talk to us. And as we begin to listen differently, our brains begin to speak to us differently.
I love that it's not the truth, it's trauma. I think that that's
Yeah.
a really powerful thing to recognize and realize, if you're able to, for sure. Well, I'm going to post Sarah's socials one more time for everyone. So if you are interested, along with her website. So if you're interested in any of her books or social media or connecting, feel free to do so. And Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. I want to just open the floor to you and ask if there's anything additional we didn't talk about, or any sites or recommendations that you have. I'll just give you the mic for a little bit.
Oh, thank you. Well, I've already told you about the whole Start Healing Now series, and that was the most important thing that I needed to tell you. Every year, I want to say this, every year we have a neuroscience summit, a neuroscience and resonance summit, where we bring scientists who study the impacts of trauma on brains to come and talk to us. And then we spend the rest of the time, we have one scientist a day, and we spend the rest of the time doing resonance for people, doing all different kinds of classes and breakouts where people can have experiential experiences, and it's free. So I just want to bring it out as an annual resource. It happens in March every year, and I love it very much because I love to get to talk to the neuroscientists. Yes. And then I love to know that they are talking to people who are living this stuff. Yeah.
And is that the Resonance Summit? Is that what that
That's
is?
the Resonance Summit.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. There's a link to that in the chat now for anyone who is interested.
Yeah.
Well, that is wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time out today to join us and to go through this topic. This was a beautiful conversation. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much, MommaFoxFire.
Thank you for joining me today on Even Tacos Fall Apart. A big shout out to our amazing guest, Sarah Peyton, for sharing her wisdom and insights on self-resonance and nonviolent communication. Remember, it is okay to give yourself the gift of self-compassion. It is okay to explore the world of healthier communication, and it is okay to embrace and understand your emotions and needs. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear from you, so feel free to share your thoughts and experiences with me on social media. I am MommaFoxFire everywhere on social media, or through our website, tacosfallapart.org. And if you found this episode helpful, please consider leaving a review or rating on your favorite podcast platform. That really helps me reach more people, and I know that together we can make a positive change in the way we communicate with ourselves and those around us. Stay tuned for more fascinating conversations right here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. And until next time, remember to savor those falling apart tacos and cherish the beauty in life's imperfections.